Do you like The Jungle Book? Do you like Stoic philosophy? Have you ever wondered, do they cross over? Well, I'm going to tell you how they do. A big part of the Stoic philosophy, perhaps the most important part, was living in accordance with nature. Instead of revering the gods, the Stoics believed that the universe itself was alive and that we should live in accordance with its rules. In other words, the universe has already given us everything we may need. Barlow introduces this concept in The Bare Necessities and what he calls Old Mother Nature's recipes. Although Bagheera mocks him and calls him a stupid, simple jungle bum, it's admirable. He needs nothing more than the jungle. Now, we see the antithesis of this in King Louie, the leader of the mob. In his musical number, he sings about wanting to be a man and that he's tired of monkeying around. Hilarious. However, Kipling shows us just how absurd this desire to part from the natural order is. Louie cups Mowgli's face with his feet and uses his arms as a skipping rope. He sings about wanting to become human while presenting himself as utterly simian. The topic of the man cub is integral. It's the focus of the entire film. Mowgli is first left in the jungle, an unnatural occurrence, but he adapts. He fights Bagheera in order to stay because he thinks this is where he belongs. He wants nothing to do with mankind, and Baloo doesn't want him going to the village either. He protests. They'll ruin him. They'll make a man out of him. But this is precisely why he must go. The film reaches its conclusion when Mowgli returns to his natural habitat. Not the jungle, but the man village. This is the return to the natural order. Even the final song, sung by the girl collecting water, outlines traditional domestic roles. And what's more, there's no boy in the song. Mowgli's been away, but now he's back where he truly belongs. The persisting understanding of Stoicism in the 21st century is its value of tolerance, not letting things get to you, being unfazed by hardships, the proverbial stiff upper lip. And there is no shortage of this in the Jungle Book.
Oh, stop worrying, Baggy, stop worrying.
The Bare Necessities. Where do I even start with this stoic and cynic masterpiece? The third line, Baloo is already advising us to forget about our worries and our strife. He may be rebuked for his way of life and insouciant attitude, but he is well and truly happy. Floating down the river, Baloo says, if you act like that bee acts, you're working too hard. It's not the bee's work ethic he criticises, rather the mentality that surrounds it. The anxiety, the urgency, the need for constant, unrelenting progression that ultimately kills the subject. It's difficult to describe a bee as greedy for life, but there's so much tension there. We even find its buzzing irritating. Now, let's look at the stoic Baloo next to Bagheera. After their rumble in King Louie's palace trying to save Mowgli, both characters each have a black eye. Baloo sees his, and he calls it beautiful, and smiles back at his own reflection, while Bagheera calls him a disreputable sight and grumbles when he sees his own. But what use would grumbling be? A true stoic can withstand anything. After many arguments and fights with tigers, Baloo and Bagheera return Mowgli to the man village. Both are sad to see him go. They'll really miss him. But this doesn't last long. Baloo quickly scoops up Bagheera and they skip off into the sunset. Much like Seneca says, beasts avoid the dangers which they see, and when they have escaped them, they are free from care. Baloo knows the secret to happiness. He does not let that which is an anticipation, imagination, or exaggeration of sorrow affect him. The best way to describe stoic temperance is living in moderation, only taking what you need and being content with it. Now in this section I'll be mentioning Diogenes, because what isn't cynic about this entire song? I mean, when you Google values of cynicism, it has the title of the song right there. Baloo says, wherever he wanders, wherever he roams, he couldn't be fonder of his big home. He isn't in constant need for a luxurious house or a grand palace like King Louie. The jungle is enough. Perhaps some of the best lines of the entire film, I may be a little biased, are as follows. When you find out you can live without it and go along not thinking about it, I'll tell you something true. the bare necessities of life will come to you. This core message, it's incredible. In a time of excess and overconsumption, if everyone learned to love what they have, everyone would be so much happier. After all, it is not the man who has too little, but the man who always craves more that is poor. King Louis is the antithesis of this philosophy. If you compare their social standings, the simple, stupid jungle bum and the king, one has nothing, the other everything, yet he still is not satisfied. He still desires fire. What use does he have for it? None. It's simply greed. And as a result, he loses everything. Now we get to what I call the poor analogy. The second verse of the Bare Necessities echoes Seneca's 90th letter. I can't do this with a straight face. The second verse in the Bare Necessities echoes Seneca's 90th letter on morality. It's titled On the Part Played by Philosophy in the Progress of Mankind. In the song, Barlow explains how to pick a prickly pear without getting a thorn in your hand. He goes on to explain that you don't need this technique at all if you just pick a different fruit. It's the dichotomy of great minds. Daedalus, Diogenes. Okay, Editor Thomas here. I've realised that this section doesn't make a lot of sense to people who haven't read a lot of Seneca letters or have that background knowledge of classics. So I'm just here to explain so you can follow along. So here I'm comparing Daedalus and Diogenes. Daedalus, you'll know him from the myth of Icarus. He's probably the best engineer of all time. And Diogenes is famously a cynic who had no possessions. He lived in a barrel in Athens. So Seneca, in his 90th letter, asked the question of who should we respect more as a philosophical mind? Because on one hand, one of them is a great creator and a great problem solver, but he responds that Diogenes is far better at solving problems because he makes it so that he doesn't have them in the first place. So in the Jungle Book example, I talk about the way Baloo picks a specific fruit with thorns. It's a bit of a stretch, to be honest. Okay, so in the Jungle Book example, I take Baloo's instructions for picking the fruit to be a sort of maybe allegorical example of a machine or a mechanism that Daedalus might construct. And then he follows it up with saying, or if you pick the big pawpaw, you don't need any of these things. I take that and I attribute it to our Diogenes state of mind. And ultimately, I decide that the latter wins. Baloo, he does solve problems. He can sort of make the machines, but he also knows how to get rid of the problem altogether. Okay, that's enough from Editor Thomas. Do we admire the construction of a dining room, the ceiling of movable panels, the roof changing pattern as often as the course, or the one who proves that we can live happily without any of these things, content with just what the earth has put on her surface?